Hi guys, I'm back again today with another video. I know I've been MIA for a while, but we are back maybe until the holidays, right? So no more distraction, um weekday daily uploads, and then we will get disrupted again when the holiday season comes. But until then, we are here. So we're going to check out the history of the Netherlands in 13 minutes. So before we do start, don't forget to subscribe, click the bell button, and let's find out.
The Netherlands, also called Holland, is known for its remarkable flatness, its beautiful canals, charming villages, tulip fields, and, of course, windmills.
Mm-hmm.
Its terrain lends itself perfectly to cycling, and the Dutch have access to one of the best national long-distance cycle networks in the world. Nowadays, the Dutch are seen to be
Okay, before we move on, I was cycling in Korea. It was so fun. So fun. But also, it made me realize that I am super bad because when you look at videos and you see the Dutch people like cycling, you're like, oh my gosh, it seems effortless. I was dying, right? I mean, it was fun, it was breezy, it was cool. But then I was like dead. Obviously I shifted it to like the one so that I will not die, but still. So clearly I need to work on that. But if only we could cycle around the Philippines, it would be so much better. It was one of the best things. Even I said this about Indonesia, right? It was like I think I like cycling. It's one of the best things if you can in a place. And yeah, really, really had fun with that.
typically friendly and liberal. Even during the age of exploration, they developed a distinctly different reputation than the other European powers, as they were out for minimum risk profit rather than glory at any cost. So let's travel back to the past and take a brief look at the history of the Netherlands. The Netherlands was once a part of what was known as the Low Countries, a coastal region in northwest Europe that consisted of what is now the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and parts of northern France. The
Mm.
earliest corroborated remains of human habitation in the region are flint objects that have been shaped using a stone flaking technique and date back to around 25,000 years. Throughout history, the area was populated first by hunter-gatherers who, by around 1500 BCE, began to establish a more agricultural society. There was also evidence of close contact with Wessex and Britain.
Mm.
Archaeological remains suggest that by 1100 BCE, the agricultural system was reasonably advanced, with evidence of mixed farming that included keeping livestock, primarily cattle, which they took care to feed over the winter. During the Iron Age, the Low Countries was distinctly Celtic and Germanic, and they remained that way until the Roman conquest. However, the Roman occupation never made it farther than the Rhine River, meaning that although the areas south of the Rhine came under Roman rule, the parts to the north remained free. During the mid-1st to the mid-3rd century CE, Roman culture spread into the northern provinces of the Low Countries, but by the end of the 3rd century, Roman power was waning. Roman influence was replaced by Germanic tribes, such as the Franks and the Frisians, and by the beginning of the 9th century, the whole area was part of the Frankish kingdom. As the 9th century drew to a close, attacks by different groups, including the Vikings, destabilized the area. In some areas, they built defensive walls to protect towns and monasteries. In other
Oh.
places, they allowed Vikings free rein, on the condition that they defend the areas against other raiding Vikings. After around 900 CE, the threat of raids diminished, and the next 4 centuries were defined by a period of growth. During this time, particularly in the 10th and 11th centuries, independent feudal states developed, and they were struggling for independence from the Germanic kings. The population grew considerably during this period, which resulted in internal colonization, by which people made
Mm.
habitable land by clearing woodland, drying up bogs, and building dikes. Due to the coastal location and low-lying lands in Zeeland, a province in the Netherlands, they actively struggled to claim land from the sea. At first, dikes were used to keep the sea at bay and were used both inland and on the coast. But later, the Zealanders were able to gain a considerable amount of land from the sea, creating polders, or areas of land below sea level that were once submerged.
Zealanders.
Creating these areas of land allowed the expansion of agricultural land and the growth of villages and towns. In Holland and Utrecht, marshland and peat bogs were drained by the digging of drainage ditches, which lowered the water table and allowed the land to be used for cattle grazing and eventually arable farming. After the 1200s, the German influence declined as the French and English gained more power. By the mid-14th century, Hainaut-Holland and Gelderland had become among the territorial principalities with the most domineering military and diplomatic positions. However, most of the Low Countries were constantly under foreign rule, and by the 1500s, the prominent Habsburgs ruled the Netherlands. In the mid-1500s, Philip II became King of Spain and Prince of the Netherlands, but faced fierce resistance from the Dutch. There were also religious rebellions in the country. In 1566, Protestant campaigners led a violent protest known as the Breaking of the Images. By 1567, the governor of the Netherlands had restored peace, but news was slow to reach King Philip II. Philip was uneasy about the protests and sent his general, the Duke of Alba, to implement a strict regime in the Netherlands. The Duke of Alba's stern measures provoked resistance to the government and triggered the 80 Years' War, which began in 1568 and continued until the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, when the Dutch Republic was formally recognized as an independent nation. While Alba's rule triggered the revolt, its primary cause was a background of religious unrest. The ideas of the Reformation, which began in 1517, resonated in the Low Countries. The new religious factions, particularly the Calvinists, had gained a strong foothold in the Netherlands.
Calvinist.
The strict regime implemented by the Spanish only further fanned the flames of social unrest. By 1573, Philip II had realized his mistake and recalled.
Netherlands went through a lot of like other countries, like Germans, the Spaniards, uh, English. Am I missing someone?
By 1573, Philip II had realized his mistake and recalled Alba. But the Netherlands was already undergoing a religious divide. The seeds of rebellion were already sprouting.
Romans, I think,
In
also.
1576, the southern and northern provinces of the Low Countries put aside their religious differences to unite against the rule of the Spanish Habsburgs. Called the Pacification of Ghent, this was the first step toward the Netherlands becoming a country in its own right. The Pacification of Ghent called for the end of religious persecution, the expulsion of Spanish troops from the Low Countries, and the restoration of local rights. In 1579, the Union of Arras was formed between Artois, Hainaut, and Douai in the south, which retained the Roman Catholic religion and loyalty to the Spanish king. In response, the northern provinces of the Netherlands formed the Union of Utrecht and were committed to the continuing resistance to Spanish rule. The first signatories were Holland, Zeeland, Utrecht, Gelderland, and Zutphen, which was a part of Overijssel, an eastern province in the Netherlands. The following year, the rest of Overijssel, the majority of Friesland, and Groningen joined, followed by the southern provinces of Antwerp and Brabant in Brabant, as well as Ghent, Brugge, and Ypres in Flanders. The Union of Utrecht was created with the intention of strengthening the central government in Brussels and establishing a league that oversaw the conduct of the war for independence against Spain. Ultimately, it became the foundation of a new state called the United Provinces of the Netherlands, later called the Dutch Republic. The people of the new state in the north began to distinguish themselves from those in the south by taking on the moniker Hollanders, due to Holland being the principal province. Later, the English would come to use the term Hollanders as an umbrella term for the Dutch, which they had previously used to denote all German speakers. Soon, the provinces in the south of the Netherlands would no longer share the same historical identity as those in the north, with those in the south identifying themselves as Belgians in the beginning of the 19th century. Although the Dutch Republic didn't throw off the sovereignty of the Spanish king, it installed provincial stadtholders, former governors of the king, as their political leaders. In 1581, the Act of Abjuration was declared, with many Netherlands provinces renouncing their allegiance to King Philip II of Spain. It declared that all magistrates of provinces in the Union of Utrecht were no longer under the rule of Philip, as he had failed his obligations as king by oppressing them and violating their rights. Therefore, he forfeited his rights as ruler in the Netherlands. After the Act of Abjuration, the provinces offered their thrones to alternative candidates. However, none of the prospective contenders were content to be a figurehead alone. After several of them tried to create ultimate powers over the Netherlands, they established their own governance. The province of Holland, which was by far the wealthiest, became the leading political force in the country, along with the
Wow.
hereditary stadtholders of the House of Orange. In the years that followed, the Dutch won many victories against the Spanish and were able to recapture many of the territories in the north. The success of the Netherlands was mainly due to the wealth of Holland and their international trade. One of the reasons England
So
and
ever
many
since
other
they've been
nations came to refer to the Netherlands as Holland was because the majority of the Dutch
wealthy.
traders they came into contact with were from that province. Amsterdam became a major trading port and center for European trade. The position at the nexus of the north-south and east-west trade routes put the Netherlands in a unique position. But in the early 17th century, it expanded its trade routes further, adding the route to the East Indies.
I think
In
this part we
1602,
knew.
the Dutch East India Trading Company was founded and became a significant part of the powerful Dutch commercial empire until it was dissolved in 1799. The Netherlands remained an independent republic until 1795, when the French Revolutionary Army invaded and occupied the country. The French transformed the Dutch Republic into the Batavian Republic until 1806,
Batavian.
when Emperor Napoleon made his brother, Louis Bonaparte,
Okay,
the King of
no.
Holland, turning it into a kingdom. Napoleon hoped that Louis would act as a puppet monarch, and with control of the Netherlands, he could defeat England by cutting off continental exports and essential trade routes. Surprisingly, King Louis won the respect of his new subjects by taking Dutch interests to heart and even ignoring some of his brother's commands in the process. Louis refused to put French interests ahead of those of the Dutch and resisted Napoleon's efforts to cut trade ties between the Netherlands and England. In response, he was ousted from the throne in 1810, and Holland became part of the French Empire. By 1814, with Napoleon's empire collapsing, the Prince of Orange was restored, but this time as a king. The Netherlands was once again independent,
Prince of
although under
Orange.
sovereign rule rather than a republic. The first king, William I of Orange, had an objectively contradictory reign in that he strove to modernize the country and yet resisted the expansion of Parliament. One of his major successes was re-establishing Dutch trade and commerce, which had suffered under the French occupation. In the mid-1800s, revolutions in Europe prompted the next king, William II, to turn the Netherlands into a liberal parliamentary state. The Netherlands became a constitutional monarchy. In 1917, the Dutch government granted every male citizen the vote, followed by granting female citizens the vote in 1919. During World War I, the Dutch declared neutrality, putting aside any political concerns and focusing on maintaining trade amid various blockades. When World War II broke out, the Netherlands once again declared its neutrality, although it was sympathetic to the Allied cause. However, this time the war came to them, with the Nazi forces invading in 1940. The Dutch forces were overwhelmed, and the government, accompanied by the royal family, was forced to withdraw to England. During the German occupation, the Dutch administrators continued their work in the civil government. They attempted to stop, or at least soften, some of the German oppression, including forced Dutch labor in Germany and the deportation of Jewish people. However, despite these attempts, there was a certain extent of collaboration between the Dutch government and the Nazi occupiers, especially during the early years of the war. The Dutch civil service played a role in the administration and enforcement of Nazi decrees. The Dutch political movements put all differences aside and formed a resistance movement. Protests included a strike by the Amsterdam dockworkers in response to the seizure and deportation of Dutch Jews to the extermination camps in Germany. The Nazis responded by executing Dutch hostages. Although some Jewish people in the Netherlands were able to go into hiding with the help of friends, the majority were captured and sent to their deaths. During the final stages of the war, the Netherlands suffered from extreme food shortages, and the Dutch were near famine during the last months before liberation. After the war, Queen Wilhelmina and her government returned from England, determined to strengthen the democracy of the Netherlands. All sectors agreed that in order to aid post-war reconstruction, industry and commerce would be allowed to flourish without an expansion of prices or wages. In this way, the Dutch were able to avoid drastic inflation. Viewing their policy of neutrality as a failure, the Dutch entered into post-war alliances with the West, including the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Since then, the politics of the Netherlands has been predominantly liberal, relaxing laws on prostitution and the use of marijuana. Same-sex
We know
marriages
that.
and euthanasia were legalized in the early 21st century, and penal sentences were relatively light. Despite their liberal reputation, the 21st century saw an increase in support for the right, exacerbated by two political assassinations, that of the anti-immigration politician Pim Fortuyn in 2002 and the filmmaker Theo van Gogh in 2004. Today, the Netherlands seems to mirror many other European countries, reining in their liberal policies and getting emerging Eurosceptical and anti-immigrant followings. However, despite the rise of the right, many areas of Dutch society remain fiercely liberal. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like
We
something
need
you
that.
might be into,
We
check out
need
the
that because it's very apparently obvious. I know, very redundant. Um, how that is true to today, right? History definitely is repeating itself. Um, that was actually very interesting. The fact that they put all this together in 30 minutes. Even if I went to school, I would not get this information this quickly unless I did my own research, right? Because in school, like, they don't care about history. They do teach you history, but it's not history. It's just like, we'll give you the good parts and erase the truth, right? So that was really good. I don't think I've ever really delved into the history of the Netherlands. I mean, as much like only important. Not even. I don't think we touched. Maybe it was mentioned in like major events, but it wasn't like the main focal point of the history lesson. Um, but anyways, by doing reactions, I've really learned a lot, and there were like moments when I was like, really, what? But anyways, let me know what you want me to check out in the next video. You can let me know in the comments or anywhere, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.